Hi Year 12s, Mr. Carney here. Just going to do a bit of a summary of Jack's chapter and some of the important points. So stick with me and hopefully I can give you some better insight on the chapter. A quick overview, set on Sunday the 25th of February 1940. It's the third chapter and the third in the chronological order. So I think it's actually the only one that's actually sits correctly in the order of the dates as they are. So the two that chronologically come before are Francis and Kip's. Jack's the only non-Westaway character in the story, or the only one that doesn't marry and have children that are part of the Westaway line. But we do see Jean, Connie, Kip and Francis through his eyes, and we also learn a little more about Tom's death. It's set in Richmond. Probably the main thing that stands out to Jack is that it's a poor man's paddock to him, having a bareness and a sad, crushed spaces. So he's not looking at it from a, middle class, working class perspective. To him, it's just somewhere he doesn't want to be. And so it really follows much of his struggle to adjust to city life, and it concludes with his decision to join the AIF, to join the Australian Army. So we see all four of those Westaway characters from that particular generation from his perspective, starting with Kip, and he and Kip seem to really have an affinity, and he says he's the kind of lad who would have been a great ally in getting up to mischief. And he also comments, because Kip loves Charlie the horse, he comments that he'll never forget Charlie for the rest of his life, his first horse, his first great love, and we also see that through the fact that he names Charlotte, by the look of it, after Charlie the horse. And Kip looks up to Jack as a real hero figure. He really gravitates to him, and Jack really seems to like Kip too. One of the reasons he then goes over and chats to them is because he's seen Connie dancing in the garden, describes her as the loveliest thing I've seen. He sees a joy in her as she dances in the morning light, and there's a hint that they were childhood friends, and he clearly has an interest in her, as opposed to the girls that his mum wants him to have an interest in. We really see that contrasted with Jean. Describes her as talking fast, arms folded, snapping from side to side. So her body language, it's aggressive, it's mean almost. He describes her features, sharp angles and tart features, her eyes chips of granite. So she is a hard woman, and she makes him feel, a grown man, feel very uncomfortable. He says, I feel a surge of guilt, my father is alive. So just her presence, this sort of seething anger that just seems to come through every part of her, even makes him feel very uncomfortable. Francis, he describes him as not the kind of boy whose friends call him Frank, which is kind of ironic. Francis in this chapter, his young, clueless self, seems to have no decent social awareness that Kip does. However, it's ironic that later Francis becomes Uncle Frank. He learns that he has to mellow, and this sort of ties with the theme of change and continuity. There's some aspects of Uncle Frank that are still the same, but he's had to change over time as a result of his experiences. So what are the key themes? So mother-son relationships, which we see throughout the text. We also see a bit of a window into middle-class Australia of the 1930s. If Jean, Kip and Francis show us working-class 1930s, through Jack and his family, we see the much more wealthier middle class. in particular through his mother, that we see the importance of social class and social expectations. Australia at this time is highly rigid in its social classes and the way that people were expected to behave. Finally, as I said, that whole idea of change and continuity, and also that continuing theme of the significance of small decisions in people's daily lives and the effect that they can have over the course of their life. Now, let's first of all look at mother-son relationships. So this parallels both Kip and Jean and Alec and Charlotte. So much the same way, there's no connection between Kip and Jean. She's very harsh towards him for different reasons, in that he reminds her of her husband. And Alec and Charlotte, we see that same disconnect, at least in the first part of Alec's chapter. So Ada Husting, Jack's mum, is overprotective of him, and she really works to ensure that he mixes with only the right kind of people. He's sent to boarding school at Ballarat Grammar. He's gone to work out on his uncle's station. But as a result of this, and that he's never had his own chance to really explore his life or make decisions for himself apart from when he was out in the country, he feels very disconnected from her. He says, "She doesn't even know me." And interestingly, or symbolically, the chapter starts with him waking in his childhood bed, his feet hanging over the edge, this sense that his mother still sees him as her little boy that she needs to protect, but he's moved on. And so therefore he feels incredibly stifled. He describes in the house there's no air. Even when he's outside, the sky feels low. It's pressing in on him. And so he just wants to escape this. And his mother even tries to engineer a marriage with Emily. And by the time Emily leaves, his mother's eyes are shining, not at the prospect of him having a romantic relationship with her. This might continue to help improve the family's social situation. She sees the financial opportunity that might come with him being able to take over Emily's father's shop. So one of the big things we see around women, both Jean and Ada, and this is actually a well-known thing, particularly through language, is that women tend to be the drivers for upward social mobility. They're the ones who care about it most. And so that trickles into the way they speak. We hear he describes his mum's company voice, higher pitched, higher vowels. She describes Connie as common, and he said she says it through these pursed lips. And so his mother's really using her language to try and show her social status. And we see a clear prejudice against Irish Catholics. She says, we've a family next door and we let their lad help, kind of like it's a charity thing. She said also Jack reflects that Kip's not allowed in the house. Mum says Catholic boys are odd and have lice. So again, the strong prejudice towards people of lower social class. She even makes the comment that having a boarder is a respectable way for a Catholic family to improve themselves. Again, that's a reference to improving their social standing. Interestingly, though, it goes even further. It extends this whole idea of eugenics, or human breeding, that was such a driving force behind Nazi policies, but it was everywhere. So we even see it well and truly embedded in Australian culture. She describes Connie's colouring as not too Irish, as though that's something good for her. However, that she's a bit broad across the face. And that's contrasted against what she calls Viking cheekbones. You can always tell good breeding from cheekbones. Again, this concept that if you marry and breed in the right way, you can, that it almost helps you evolve as a person and the social level that you're able to attain. in a different way, men act as drivers of masculine ideals. And again, we see this parallel through Alec and Francis. But interestingly, it's something that Kip rejects. Alec, we know, is asked to hop in the car with his friends while they're drinking. We sense the danger of it. Ultimately, he rejects that, thinking of Kip. Francis joins those boys who pretend to be his friends and leaves him very, very ashamed of his behaviour, again, because he's trying to live up to their ideals. And we particularly see this through the older men who are trying to pressure Jack into joining up with the military. The older man, Jack says, well, it's not against the law for me not to go. And he says, well, it's against my law. I was a Posier's young man. So this implication that you're not at my level of masculinity yet because you haven't gone and done your duty for the empire. And he also comments that they're offering encouragement to blokes who might be lacking in the spine department. Again, this idea of becoming a man by going to war. And even Emily comments, Dad can't lift much on account of his arm, the Great War. Interestingly, Jack ultimately resists all that. He says it's stirring no feeling in me. Rather, it's the picture in his mind of Connie taking her husband's hand and the thought of getting his parents sorted that motivates him to sign up. He's driven by other factors, and both seem to be factors of desiring to escape. Interestingly, then, that his decisions ultimately lead to his death. Whereas someone like Kip, who stays a bit more true to themselves and is truthful about their decisions and tries to make decisions based on the best outcome, gets to live the long and meaningful life. The last one, we see some reflection from Jack on that whole idea of change and continuity. He comments that everyone changes a little bit all the time, but comments that out on the station everything is the same. And so there's this recognition that some things are similar, some things don't change, some things in people don't change, but other things are always shifting. And this is symbolized, I think, through photos. And we have Connie say, your memory fades, but not pictures, they last forever. He also comments that I try to think about what the photograph will look like when everyone can see it, the kind of story it will tell. And so in one sense, photos capture a moment in time. And we can they allow people to look back and what things were like. But they also allow us to see how far we've come, how different we are from in the past. The interesting thing is for these two who die, they're sort of trapped in that moment forever. They never get to change because of their tragic outcomes. And so it's an important idea, and we see this throughout the rest of the story, that the times are always changing, that each character is in a new time and a new place, and that influences their opportunities and the way that they're able to behave in their social structure. Okay, well, hopefully that's helped you. As I said, certainly haven't covered everything. There's so much in Jack's chapter, but I hope that's been helpful for you.